Right. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming along. I'm Sean Dukes, and I'm here today to talk about securing your Salesforce community. A very exciting subject, obviously trending, very popular at the moment. So there was a talk very similar to this at Dreamforce. I think the video has been watched 93 times since then, and I was probably 10 of those 93. But there is something quite similar that was on a Dreamforce talk. So I do want to start by going pretty much straight into the demo. But just before I do that, I was just going to ask people a couple of questions. So did anyone go to Dreamforce here? Anyone here was at Dreamforce? No, oh, we got a Dreamforce one. Did you go to see Metallica? Metallica are awesome, right? So I did go to see Metallica. There I was in the front row, giving it a bit of that, right? But they're not my favorite band, okay? So my favorite band, sorry, get rid of him. My favorite band is called Woodacre, okay? They're kind of similar. Guitarist is really cool, okay? And they've got this amazing website, right, which is built on something called Force.com, I think. And it sort of looks a little bit familiar. So I kind of see this website, and I'm going on here and thinking, you know, what I want to do now is I need to go and buy myself a Woodacre t-shirt. And my subscription, I'm a fan, so I've obviously got a subscription to the fan club. I want to renew my subscription. But I suddenly look in here and I'm thinking, oh, hang on a second, that is Force.com. That's a little bit familiar. So I wonder what happens if I do this. And so what you can see here is you can get straight into the back of the community really, really easily and see all sorts of things like helpful views, like all accounts. And I can see every account in the org, just like that. And if I go into any one of those accounts, I can see the record, I can see all the related lists, I can edit it, do whatever I like, okay? So clearly, hopefully, you're not going to set your community up quite like this. You'll have had a little bit of sharing and stuff going on and things like that. So I have got one in true Blue Peter style that I prepared earlier. So this is a slight variation of that same community, but with a little bit more of the sharing. But we've still got quite a lot going on. So if I go in here again, and I go and I have a look at the list of recent contacts there, I can see that same list again. And then if I go into the views, and hang on a second, there's a view here called pseudo fans. Have a look at that, and I'm in it. What's going on? So let's go and have a look at that and see what's. So it says my fan level is lightweight. That doesn't seem right. I know I'm a die-hard fan, so I can't really understand why I'm in there, and I need to change that. But for whatever reason, somebody's now gone in here to this page now and they've taken away the edit button, which obviously is a great thing. However, I do know that if you do this, I can then go and edit that record. So I can actually get in and I can edit that record now, right? So I don't think my fan level is lightweight. I think I'm die-hard, right? And I have no idea what pitter is, but I think I should be more pitter. So I'm going to be more pitter. And my subscription. So 2019, I don't need a credit card. Let's go and have a subscription for the next 5 years and then save that. So that record is actually saved. I think it's not going to go back to the right page, but that's simply because this obviously wasn't designed for me to do this. But I am able to go in there in the community. And essentially, this is really what you can do in a community if you don't set it up properly. Okay, so if I go in and see the sorry, I want to do the other one. So what I want to talk about is really how you can make this experience a little bit better and not show everybody everything in your org. So let's go and have a look at the slides quickly. Go back to our slides, get rid of him. So if we look at this, basically there's a number of things that you can do and a number of things that you should do. But the first thing you should do is do not assume anything except this. And that is that users can see and do anything that their profile and sharing settings allow them. And this isn't like I've just discovered the biggest hole in Salesforce. This is essentially design behavior. And if you read any of the help files, that is exactly what it says in the help file. This is a bit shorter, but that is exactly what it says in the help file. So you need to set up your community correctly because they are quite scary things. So there's a number of simple things that you can do and that you must do. The first one is those list views, okay? So you want to be able to control those list views. You don't want people to be able to see all of the list views in your org. You don't want them, you need to worry about the profiles. You need to know about what data access people have got, stuff like that. This is all really, really simple stuff, right? And also things like page layout. So if you're going to have standard pages in your community, you need to make sure that the people who can see those pages can only see the fields you want them to see and can only do what you want them to do, okay? So they're all really, really basic stuff that you can do. And then there's that sharing. So I'm going to come on to the sharing in a bit and look at that specifically. But let's look at some of those other things first. So let's look at those, the page layouts and stuff like that. So if we come into our community here, and what we're going to do is we're just going to start by looking at the profile and just show you a couple of things on there. Because one of the interesting things about communities, and it's actually a thing particularly if you've had your community for a while and not used it a lot of things are enabled by default, right? So if you have, in this profile, I've obviously set it up a little bit. So this is, I want to come down to the objects here. But if you look at it, if your community is brand new and you've never gone in here and you've never looked at this, you've never set anything up, then essentially community users by default will have full access on stuff like contracts and orders and things like that. So you need to go in and you need to take that off, right? So that's all really, really simple stuff. I'm assuming that everybody here has some kind of admin experience. So, but if you haven't, your admin needs to go in and make sure that the access to objects are right. And also, if you've had, especially if you've had your community knocking around for quite a long time and you've installed apps and stuff, you may well have installed those apps saying give access to all users. That will include community users as well. So those community users will have access to custom objects as well by default, and also things like Visualforce pages and classes and stuff like that. So you can actually, you may need to go into the profile and make sure there's no pages in there that aren't supposed to be there, that kind of stuff. And that's all really, really basic stuff, right? Then we need to look at stuff like the page layouts, okay? So if I go into the object manager and I go to look at the contact record, right? So, and then I can go and look at the page layout on that contact record, and you could do stuff like take the fields away. That's really, really obvious. By the way, with that, with your profile, you can obviously go into the field level and all that kind of stuff as well, and not just simply object permissions. It's right down to field level permissions to what people can do. The trouble with the page layouts is if you're going to have these standard page layouts in your org, and I've got one here, is that if the customer has, or if by default they have write access to that, and there may be very good reasons why you want people to have write access to their contact record, for example, then they will by default have write access to the name field, whatever object it is. Then you can't take that off the page layout, or at least I don't know how to take it off the page layout. So but you can make sure at least that the fields that you want are on the page layout. If you wanted to do something like still allow a field to be on that page layout for whatever reason, but not allow somebody to change it, you could always have a validation rule or something that basically looked at the profile and looked at the field and said you can't update this field if your profile is such and such. That's a pretty straightforward and easy thing to do. Okay, and then we're going to look at those pesky list views, right? So basically by default, and if I come to, let's go to, excuse me, let's go to my basically back to the app. If you look at those list views, so if I look at accounts, and I've got all those list views in there. Now, one thing you can't do, unfortunately, is you can't do this in Lightning. So you have to switch to Salesforce Classic. And then when you switch into Salesforce Classic, it's pretty straightforward. So I'm going to switch into Salesforce Classic here. And then I've got those list views. So basically for accounts, let's say, for example, if I look at all accounts, my all accounts list view, you can then go in and you can edit that. And it is better in Lightning, except for this bit, obviously. And then you can say you've got the visibility. So by default, when you ever create if you've made that view visible to all your users, then it will be visible to your community users as well. So you need to say it's only visible to certain groups of users. And here you can then go in and say it's not available to, it's only available to, for example, all internal users. And then if I save that, that list view is then not available in my community, but otherwise it would be. That still leaves us with a problem, though. So if we go back to the, sorry, I'll go back to the demo bit. That still leaves us with a little bit of a problem because, oh no, sorry, I'm going to the wrong page here. Try to get better, right? Where am I going? Where am I going? Here. Right. So although I've changed, although I've set this one up better, I actually still have edit access to that record. So even though I can't, on this page layout there is no edit button. You'll see that there's no edit button there, but I can still edit that record as I showed you earlier. And it doesn't really matter what I do. I basically am still able to go in and edit that record. There is, however, if you review through, if you happen to be reading the Spring 17 release notes, there is a feature in there that enables you to disable access to standard pages. And it's quite complicated. You need to write a long piece of code. You need a class to activate it. Luckily, I have such a thing, and it's not even a class, but I have, actually within our app, we have a little thing where we can turn that off. So I've just got a little setting in here, but effectively what it's doing is exactly the same thing. And I can disable access to those standard pages. So just in my community here, at the moment, I can see that page because I've got access to standard pages. So if I know the record ID, I can come in and I can edit it. However, you can turn that off. So basically, I'm just turning it off with a simple switch here, but essentially there's quite a lot of code behind that. And then if I go to the same page again, you'll find that doesn't exist. So you can actually take access to those standard pages off, but it's quite a codey sort of a thing to do. Another thing when we're on the subject of those pages is you can actually change the way the pages look too. So if I come back here again, let's just do that. So that doesn't take away access to the lists and so on. And to be honest, I'm quite a fan of, I might need to refresh that because I shouldn't be able to see that all context one, hopefully. I'm quite a fan of declarative stuff. It's still there, I'm not quite sure why, never mind, ignore me. But basically, I'm quite a fan of declarative apps, declarative development, all that kind of stuff. So I'm not sure you necessarily want to do this, but you are able to go into these standard pages and change the way that they work as well. And to do that, you come into the community builder. So I'm going to go in here and quickly do that. So let's go into communities. Let's do it let's do it here. Right, so we're going to communities. And I would do something really, really simple. But if we go into our communities, and there's my, go into the builder, and you can, when it opens up here, if you click on the drop down here, you can see all the different kind of pages that you've got access to, including, for example, the record detail page. So it's possible to go into that record detail page and do something like this. So you can see that there's this, you've got the record information tabs in there. You can just take that out. So you can just take that out, and then it's actually not there. And if you really, really want to scare people, you could put something else in its place. So I'm going to have I'm going to put in a little a rich content editor. Let's just pop that in there, and then we're going to put in a scary picture, right? So I'm going to select an image, and this should definitely put people off, right? So I'll put that in there, and then if I save that page, hopefully we'll have a bit of a save button somewhere. I don't know where my save button's gone. Okay, that's good. Why can I save that? I've got to publish it. Sorry, that's all right. So I'm going to publish it. So that takes a few seconds while I publish that. But essentially, if somebody then came to that page in my community, instead of seeing the details of the record, they're going to see that. So you can really kind of mess up these pages. It takes a second or two, again, for that to work. So it's going to take, we have to wait till the sort of publishing has happened. Anyway, while that's cooking, let's go on and look at something else. So I said I want to look at that sharing. So we're going to look at the slides on the sharing, okay? So we've done that. We'll look at the sharing. So we're just looking here at two very simple things, accounts and contacts. And there's different ways and different things that people can see. So by default, a community user can see their account and their contact record. Sharing can be set up in different ways, and you may well know this, but sharing can be, with contacts and accounts, it's a slightly special one in that it can be controlled by parent or it may not be controlled by parent, and you set that. At the moment, mine is set up to control by parent, so essentially I can see every contact in my org, or in my account, because I've set up the sharing a little bit, but you can also separate those, so the sharing is set by is set to private, in which case you'd only be able to see yourself. And then you can have something called a sharing set, and the sharing set will then enable you to re-see stuff that you can't see. So sharing set is, in communities, the sharing model is kind of fundamentally the same, but it's very simple. There's no such things as sharing rules and things like that don't work in a community. There's a thing called a sharing set, which enables you to have some control over what people can see. We'll have a quick look at that in a second. With a sharing set, you can have different sharing sets and link them to different profiles. And if you do that, you can then have different users in your community who can see different things if that's what you need to do. So it is a way around it. So let's go and have a look at that. So first of all, we'll see if my page got there. No, it didn't. I don't know. That's still publishing. So that needs to, for whatever reason, it hasn't quite got there yet. But if it did ever get there, and this is obviously a live demo, so got it. Maybe I have to click got it, and then it will get there. Basically, if it did get there. So let's have a look at the sharing then. So we'll have a quick look at the sharing quickly. And I don't think I'm going to have time to actually show you this because it does take a while to save itself. But basically, you can see their account and contact is private, but contact is controlled by parent. If you wanted to separate that out, you can do it. But this is unusual. It's only a couple of standard objects that do that. If you want to make your external sharing private, which I would do, you have to make your internal sharing the same. You can't make it controlled by parent. You could make it, internal could be public read only, but it can't be controlled by parent. It must be independent. And then you better set that up. Anyway, so I've only got, it's quite a big subject, and I don't have an unlimited amount of time. So I'm going to show you a couple other things before we finish off. Okay. So I think we did that sharing. Okay, so there's some new things. So communities are changing all the time. As I say, if you've had your community for a long time, there'll be some things that are enabled for you that are not enabled in newer communities, and you need to be aware of those. So the first thing, this isn't exactly a case of that, but there's a newish feature called an org health check, which you can run. That org health check enables you to go into your org, and I'll show you that hopefully in a second, when we just about have time. Enables you to go into your org and get a quick picture of what you might have that you need to worry about. Then there's stuff like restricting uploads. So you may not know this, but in a community, the default file size that a user can upload is 2 gigabytes. So you probably want to change that. So you can change that. You can also restrict the types of files that people can upload. And then we have clickjack protection. So this picture might be a bit misleading. It suggests that I'm trying to get lots of clicks on my Instagram account by jumping out of a window. That's not what clickjacking is at all. Clickjacking is basically, well, it's apparently a fairly old type of a hack, but basically it's where you have an iframe. So if for whatever reason your community can be hosted in an iframe, if you have an old community, by default it will probably be set to this can be hosted in any site. You can now change it so it's not hosted in it can't be hosted in any site, or it can only be hosted in whitelisted sites. So you can only put it on certain sites that you trust. And that is the same thing. There's a new feature called content security policy as well. Now, that is, if anybody remembers the British Airways hack where all those credit card details were stolen, if they'd had their content security policy set correctly, that wouldn't have happened. So basically, what happened in that case is that somebody had gone into one of their JavaScript libraries and redirected information to a site that was called bairways.com, and that basically swiped off all their credit card details. So content security policy enables you to call out to external sites, but again, it allows you to whitelist them so that you can only call out to specific external sites. Okay, so they're all good things. And if your org is brand new, or if your community is brand new, they'll all be by default set to the highest level. If your org is quite old, they're probably by default set to the least secure level. Okay, so it's something you need to worry about. So I'm running out of time, and I'm aware of that. So I'd like to go and show you how you find those things. It's quite difficult to find them, but it is relatively easy once you know how. And then we want to talk about just a couple other things. So what I've shown you is all really mainly on the declarative side, but there are other behaviors about your community that you also need to be aware of. So if you're creating custom pages in your community and stuff like that, then the same thing that applies to any developer applies to you. So things like cross-site scripting and SOCL injections and all that kind of stuff can be delivered through a community if you don't do it correctly. So to avoid against that, obviously your developers hopefully know what they're doing, and it's not a bad idea to do stuff like code scanning as well. So to scan your code, to check for vulnerabilities, and ideally you get somebody else to scan it. So if you're using a third-party app that uses communities, you want to make sure that it's been through security review, so these vulnerabilities will have been at least tested. And finally, there's some behavioral things you can do. So you can monitor stuff like login attempts. So you can track things through the monitoring in Salesforce, so how many times people are trying to log in, look for unusual behaviors, look for people changing records, track field history, all that kind of stuff is also all really, really useful. And finally, and last but absolutely 100% not least, is testing. So you need to test this stuff. You need to get, ideally, other people to test this stuff. You need to get people to try and break into your community and make sure that it is secure. So they're all the recommendations. Sorry I only had 20 or so minutes to rattle through it. My final message to you is really assume nothing. Be quite paranoid about your community, and that will put you in a really, really good place. Okay, that's it. Any questions quickly? Not that I'm aware of. Is there anything you're aware of?
Oh, yeah, that's
No, but it does. Not that I'm aware of at the moment. No. Anything else? Wow. Sorry about that. I honestly, I could have done with. I could have had twice as much time and still run out. But I see there's a lot to it. If anybody does want to come and talk to me and ask about how you kind of get in some of these other things, I'll be more than happy to show you because I've got it all set up.
Brilliant.
Okay, thanks very much. Thanks, everybody.